Where'd you get your bonds?
The Federal Reserve has cut its key interest rate to the lowest level on record.
Biggest interest rate
The
cuts
federal
of history.
funds rate, the interest that banks
Crisis will happen.
The biggest fiscal stimulus we have ever seen.
And that'll solve the problem. We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis, and the federal government is responding with decisive action. We boosted confidence in money markets.
Have you taken a large home loan? Or did you put your savings in stocks, mutual funds, or bonds? If not, then you can relax. But all of us who did are living on borrowed time. This is the story of the greatest financial crisis of our time, the one that is on its way.
They spent hundreds of billions of dollars to show that they were doing something, but not properly designed and not as effective as it should have been.
When they start losing money, hey, we got to get back in the game. We got to get those dice rolling again. Hey, let's create another bubble. You think the dot-com bubble was too big? We got a bigger one for you. We'll call it the real estate and the credit.
Well, the problem is they never actually cure the crisis, right? They just give alcohol to a drunk. It doesn't sober him up. It just, sets him up for, a bigger hangover. And that's all we've done. And that's all we're trying to do. And so I know at some point you kill the patient, right? At some point you can't drink anymore. It's just the end of it. You reach the end of the ability. And that's where we are.
Congress wanted to believe them. Congress wanted an excuse to bail out the auto workers. And the executives gave them just enough political cover to say, well, I'm not really doing this because I want auto worker votes and I'm going to give them a huge amount of money. I'm really doing this for the American economy.
The Federal Reserve has cut its key interest rate to the lowest level on record. The federal funds rate.
So the solution is the problem. That's why we had a problem in the first place. And this is the danger in protecting investors and consumers from the consequences of their own decisions.
We can do it, but we need to do it soon, because the clock is ticking and time is not working in our favor.
I know many Americans have questions tonight. How did we reach this point in our economy? And what does this mean for your financial future? These are good questions, and they deserve clear answers. And they deserve clear answers. First, how did our economy reach this point?
They took down the symbols, the financial symbols of America, the twin towers of the world trade.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center.
My old company, my old company where I used to work, the whole company's missing.
The story of the great financial crisis begins just like many of the stories of our era, in the United States on September 11th, 2001. The terrorists knew exactly what they were doing, striking at the ultimate symbol of the global economy. And they did it when the US was already slumping into a recession after the dot-com bubble had burst.
Despite the tragic events of September the 11th, the foundations of our free society remain sound, and I am confident that we will recover and prosper as we have in the past.
In spring 2001, the Federal Reserve started lowering interest rates. And now it continued lowering rates to save companies on the brink and to keep unemployment down. During 2001, the interest rate was lowered from 6.5 to 1.75%. In 2003, it was cut all the way to 1%, and it remained there for a full year.
Predicting the panic of 08, the economic 9/11, and the current economic crisis that we're still in was probably one of the easiest forecasts we've ever made in our 30 years of trend forecasting. It was very simple.
Gerald Celente lives in Kingston, a few miles north of New York. He's one of the top trend analysts in the US. He has been called the modern Nostradamus. He didn't just predict the current crisis, he also predicted the dot-com bubble and the stock market collapse of 1987.
Immediately after 9/11, the President of the United States, George W. Bush, told the people to be good Americans and go out and shop. But how are they going to do it? You're in a recession. The Federal Reserve comes to the rescue.
In his memoir, Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan writes that he knew that low interest rates might cause a bubble.
It's party time!
Traditionally, central banks remove the punch bowl once the party starts. The interest rate can't remain low for too long, or people will do things they'll regret later.
This is one party that just has to turn out right.
Well, the purpose of a party is to have fun together. And a successful party needs planning and skill.
Greenspan argued that the Fed should never remove the punch bowl, but rather keep refilling it when the party started to peter out. And if things went bad, the Fed would clean up the mess and tend to the hangover. Banks and speculators loved it. Now they could take greater risks than ever before. If they were successful, they could keep the profits. And if they were unlucky, Greenspan would rescue them.
Mom was that way. Let me come home crying over something and she'd give me candy every time.
When you see the stock market come down and the real estate bubble burst, all that phony wealth is going to evaporate. And all that's going to be left is all the debt that we accumulated to foreigners.
Peter Schiff is another analyst who was roundly mocked when he predicted a crisis for the US economy in the midst of the boom.
We went on an unprecedented global spending binge. American citizens borrowed and spent trillions of dollars to buy stuff. And that is why we're in so much trouble. It was because we got drunk on all that Fed alcohol. Fed alcohol. Fed alcohol.
In a world that was suddenly uncertain, with the country under attack, nothing felt safer than investing in your own home, in the American dream.
I do believe in the American dream. I believe there is such a thing as the American dream. Owning a home is a part of that dream. It just is. Right here in America, if you own your own home, you're realizing the American dream.
Vernon Smith was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002. He received it for his research in experimental economics. In his experiments, he puts economic theories to the test. Smith is an expert on bubbles.
If you can buy a home with almost nothing down, then you do well if the prices continue to go up. If it goes down, well, then you have an incentive to walk away from it and let the bank have it.
Low interest rates caused a housing bubble. Cheap loans encouraged people to buy more and bigger homes. Housing prices began to rise by 10% a year. So many took out a second mortgage on their old house to fund consumption.
You want to go on that vacation? Buy some new clothes? How about put an addition on your house? You don't have the money? How about a home equity loan? That's for you. Let's use your house as a piggy bank.
The banks granted loans to almost anyone. Why would you need a decent income to buy a home if you can get rich just living in it? The market even coined the term Nina loans. No income, no assets, no problem. You'll get a loan anyway.
The legislation was more aggressively pushing lenders to lend to people of modest means, people whose incomes were 80% of the median income or below.
Politicians encouraged this. For a long time, both the left and the right have been encouraging home ownership. So they've created deductions, subsidies and insurances. And they created two huge mortgage financing companies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Their job was to use thousands of billions of dollars to insure loans for people who couldn't get them on the open market. They were government-sponsored enterprises. They had private owners, but they had been created by Congress, and their transactions were guaranteed by the government.
So particularly Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are government-sponsored enterprises, and what it means is they're private, not now maybe, but they're private companies that have special charters from the government. And the thing about government-sponsored enterprises, which is the main thing people are talking about, is a sense that they're guaranteed by the government.
First of all, government-sponsored corporations that help create our mortgage system. I introduced two of the leaders here today. They call those people Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, as well as the federal home loan banks, will increase their commitment to minority markets by more than $440 billion.
In the last decade, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have donated more than $200 million to politicians in Washington. Enterprise-sponsored government. I asked the former Freddie Mac chief economist what they got for their money.
I don't know. I mean, that's a tougher question. No, they had a pretty good charter. They were regulated in a spotty way. In many ways, the regulatory structure wasn't that bad, but it was the case that the regulatory structure was a compromise. It wasn't a treasury, it wasn't a housing, really. It was somewhere in between.
You know, there was a huge moral hazard courtesy of the government in the mortgage market. When the government, through Fannie and Freddie, started to guarantee mortgages, then the lenders were no longer worried about getting their money back because the government said, we guarantee it.
And so that's why I've proposed and urged Congress to fully fund the American Dream Down Payment Fund. This will use money, taxpayers' money, to help a qualified low-income buyer make a down payment.
Well, greed has to be balanced with a certain amount of fear, and that's what down payment rules are all about, and amortization rules, is to keep people from carried away by